Whether we start processing interactively or whether we use scripting or automate the processing through integration services, we'll need to specify process options to control exactly what happens. Some of the options are not available when we do interactive processing, but they're all available through scripting. Let's take a look at all of the available process options. The simplest possible option is just to use the process full option. We can do this with a database, or with a cube, or a dimension. And with process full, the entire object that we're processing would get completely rebuilt. Now that can take a lot of disk space and a lot of time to process if we have a large database. If you have an existing database, the client applications will continue to query the existing cubes until the processing is complete. When the database processing is complete, Analysis Services switches the users over to the new database and drops the old one. Sometimes, though, databases are too large to process this way, and we need to break the processing steps down component by component. And when we do that, there are implications that we need to consider. Another process option that we have is the process clear option, and that simply empties out the object. Of course, if it's empty, it cannot be queried. Then we have process default, which, if you might recall, was the default setting in our Analysis Services project in bits. And with that option, Analysis Services will only perform processing on any objects that are currently unprocessed. Then we have the process data option. And in this case, any data that currently exists in the object, whether it's a cube or a dimension, gets removed and fresh data gets loaded. However, no indexes are created. It doesn't check to see if anything's changed with the dimensions. When we do a process full, all of the pointers that relate the fact records back to dimensions will get rebuilt. But for process data, there's an underlying assumption that the dimension data has not changed, and therefore the indexes or pointers back to that dimension data do not require changes, and so we can more quickly load data into the cube. When we use process data with dimensions, then the data for attributes and hierarchies gets loaded. Another option for quicker data loading is the process incremental. With this option, we provide a query for the processing, and in that query we identify the records that we want to load into the cube during processing. So rather than the entire fact table being read into the cube, only selected records are read in, which, if we're selecting records for a single day, would be a lot faster than selecting records for a year or multiple years. However, it's really important to get the where clause correct for the incremental query. Otherwise, we could wind up with duplicate rows in our cube, and our totals will be incorrect. Then we have the process indexes option. The data that's already been loaded will be used to build out the indexes. This would be bitmap indexes for our dimensions, and aggregations and indexes for our fact records. Indexes are what helps Analysis Services quickly retrieve data. Sometimes processing can be made more efficient by running the process data operations first and then running the process indexes separately. Then we have process update, and this is applicable only to our dimensions. It preserves existing data, and then it performs an incremental update on the dimension. So any new records in our dimension tables will get added into our dimension stores in Analysis Services. Or if records have changed, they'll be updated. And if a dimension's been deleted from the source, it will be flagged for deletion in our Analysis Services dimension. When we perform a process update, the relationship types that we have, or any attribute relationships we have in the dimension, may impact whether or not the processing will be successful. If we have flexible relationships and we have data that's changed, then the aggregations will be destroyed. And that just means that queries will run slower until you can do a full process of the dimension. But the benefit is that we can make changes to the dimension without invalidating our cube. On the other hand, if we do a process full on a dimension, then even if no data has changed, just the sheer fact that we've executed the process full will invalidate the cube and require us to do a full process on the cube also. However, when that happens, the users won't have access to that new cube until processing is complete, which could take a while if you have a large database. Now with process update, if we have a rigid relationship type, then processing will fail if we try to move a member from one parent to another. But if we're just adding new members, processing should complete successfully. Speaking of new members, we have the process add option, which is applicable only to dimensions, and it's used when we have new members that we want to load into our dimension stores. And then last we have the process script cache. And this is used to have analysis services evaluate our MDX script, locate any cache statements that we might have in the script, and then persist the results of those cache statements in memory.